voice, Father. Let us hear your words. How many of you guys grew up memorizing John 3:16? All right. What's the first phrase in that verse? For God so loved the world, right? For God so loved the world. We've grown up memorizing that verse, right? But have we ever thought about that phrase? For God so loved the world. God loved us so much that he abandoned everything and came down here to earth as Jesus. He gave up everything. Jesus died on a cross for us, right? Because of his relentless love for us. In Philippians 2:8 it says, he humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on a cross. Jesus never wavered when he was down here on earth. People thought he was reckless, but he was relentless. He had his eyes fixed on that cross because he loved us. In Romans 8:39 it says, neither height nor depth nor anything else in all of creation will be able to separate us from the love of God. God's relentless love for us. Because of that, when we ask Jesus into our life, when we do that, we become children of God. And Paul says that when that happens, there's a change that has to occur in our lives. And Paul says in Romans 6:13, but rather offer yourselves to God as those who have been brought from death to life, and offer the parts of your body to him as instruments of righteousness. Paul goes on to talk about how we have died to sin. We were once slaves to sin, but now we are slaves to righteousness, which is found in God. And people, if we're not slaves to righteousness, what are we slaves to? All right, throughout the New Testament, Paul talks about his abandonment to God. Paul was relentless, all right? He was relentless, and he was fixed on God. And in Philippians 3:7-8, it says, but whatever was to my profit, I now consider loss for the sake of Christ. What is more, I consider everything a loss compared to the surpassing greatness of knowing Christ Jesus, my Lord, for whose sake I have lost all things. I consider them rubbish, that I may gain Christ and be found in him. Later he said, I want to know Christ and the power of his resurrection. Paul was relentless. He had his eyes fixed on Jesus. He considered everything else what rubbish. All right? How many things, what a standard to live by. How many of us let other things get in the way of God? All right? Paul calls that rubbish, right? Because he understood that he needed to have his eyes fixed on God. All right? He was abandoned to Christ. And he understood that was the only thing that mattered. That was the purpose he was created for, was to have his eyes fixed on God. In Romans 12:1, he says, therefore, I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer yourselves as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. This is our worship to God, having our eyes fixed on him, having our full attention on him. Well, you may ask, what does that look like? That looks like having all areas of our life obedient to God. In 2 Corinthians 10:5 it says, and we take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. We have to make every area of our life obedient. Every area fixed on God. All right, it's a lifestyle. Our full attention on God. And that's the way Paul lived. Oswald Chambers said in his devotional, my utmost for his highest, the test of abandonment comes every second of every minute of every hour of every day. Constantly making that decision, God, I'm going to be obedient. And I'm going to have my devotions today. I'm going to go pray for that person. We have to make the constant, conscious decision to be aligned with Christ, to have our gaze fixed on him. And people, when we do that, when we fix our eyes on God, he comes and transforms our life. He transforms our life, and he transforms the lives of everybody around us. All right, Adam and Eve, they had their attention on God, but what happened when they took their attention off of him? They sinned, right? You want to get rid of sin in your life? You want to get rid of sin in your life? Fix your attention on God. All right, Hebrews 12, 1 and 2, it says, let us throw off everything that hinders us, and the sin that so easily entangles us. Let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. People, God's relentless love for us, it calls us to reckless abandonment to Him.